Welcome. This week's film, Do the Right Thing. It is an American film, 1989. Directed, produced, written by Spike Lee. He, too, is an auteur director, something that we see frequently in the films here this semester. And he, like Coppola, is a film school director. He's a graduate of NYU's film program. And this now shapes how stories are getting told from directors in the past that didn't have that background. The story itself runs about 24 hours. It's a hot day in Brooklyn, New York. It doesn't really leave the neighborhood. Everything comes through and in and out of this very defined space. So it's not epic in its scale, and yet the confinement does contribute to the narrative. There's a reason for that. So it's a story told from a non-white perspective, and this is unusual, especially at this time now. Films, and even today, they're so expensive to make that for others to have a voice, it's difficult. So Spike Lee is brilliant in getting the funding to tell this story. And then he actually makes money on the film, which allows him to go on and make some other films as well. From a narrative standpoint, you're going to see a stark difference from To Kill a Mockingbird to Do the Right Thing. And it's really about a 30-year difference that's transpired here, and it's a completely different take on it. But who controls, who tells the story is really important in cinema. And certainly to have other voices contribute to a narrative, at least from our country's standpoint, has to be a positive thing, even if it's uncomfortable at times. The structure it's traditional, so it moves in that traditional story arc. It runs up to a climactic event, and that trigger point is the smashing of the boombox, and then what happens. One of the things I do want to point out when I've explained the story arc before, we understand that it drives up to a climactic event, and then the resolution happens. And generally that is, as I've mentioned in the past, they live happily ever after, whatnot. The resolution in this film is really, really important, because what is Mookie left with becomes an important component to the story. So don't overlook that. Again, comparing it to last week's film, such a big and epic scale, much larger budget, much larger film to story ratio. But the way that Spike creates this world, then contains it on these few streets, also contributes to the confinement these characters feel. It is an expensive medium. It's amazing that he got funded, but he did, and he's always able to show a return on that investment, which is why he continues to get funded, regardless of how difficult the stories can be that he tells at times. It is one neighborhood. Here's something to look at, and we covered this, I'll do it again in a second, but when we looked at actors, and one of the things that the textbook covers on that is the sociological makeup of the character, and that absolutely plays a significant role here. Even Spike says this, there aren't necessarily answers to the questions that he raises, but he, and I think most filmmakers would defend him in the stand, which is he's stating that it's not his job as a filmmaker to present solutions, but it is his job to present the problems so that discussions around these problems can take place. Now, has it sparked good solutions? Yeah, unfortunately, I think that's up for debate. It does deal with racism. There's one segment in here where everybody gets a shot at some difficult language, and it's very pointed, and it comes at a time in the film that just makes it obvious that racism is an issue, is a problem, and you get to see it from different perspectives. But because of that, I think it's important. Racism is a word that we use all the time in this country, and we should just revisit what the actual definition is here. So I've posted that here. I've got it again here. And these are just obviously different descriptions of the same term. And then probably this one right here captures it all for us. It really is hatred or intolerance of another race or other races based on the other group's race. We actually started this off back in week 3, which with our film called Bicycle Thieves, and we talked about this idea of being disenfranchised, and we saw that story of the Italian father who gets his bike stolen. And that was his means to provide for his family so that they could survive. And once that was stolen and the political system couldn't help him, that made him disenfranchised or marginalized from the system. And the question that film raises is he allowed to morally then steal another bike so that he can provide for his family? You're going to see the violent climax in this thing, and these same questions can be re-asked. Remember that in here we're studying how a story is told and how the sophistication of the medium and these different elements comes together. Things that you want to watch for here is how this cinematography becomes relatively non-traditional. So where Coppola's last week is epic and wide angle lenses, lots of landscape and scenery, here the world is smaller, and to even push some of the tense moments, he's dollying very quickly to certain characters. He's very, very close to certain characters. He uses what we call a Dutch angle, so the camera is kind of tilted, and that's set to create tension and stress in the viewer. He actually is placing burners, candles, lights, a flame source under the camera that we don't see, but you'll see in certain shots these heat waves. And all that is designed intentionally. He does use jump cuts, and it starts right from the opening credits sequence with the dance and Rosie Perez. Watch how he is able to cut her in and out of different costumes to the music, and that sets up being able to cut 2 different storylines very quickly. It's very clever from an editing standpoint. Acting, great performances by some characters here. You'll recognize some of them. Some of them you'll have to look a little closer to recognize. And then you're going to see, as I mentioned just a second ago, these characters driven by where they come from, their economic class, their education, their home lives. These all come to a head in the film. Sound, he's probably one of the first filmmakers now that embraces and begins to use hip-hop. There's lots of ambient noise, background chatter, music, there's buzz. He's trying to place you on this neighborhood's block. Music actually is a character in the film, right from the opening music to Radio Raheem's boombox, and that, as I mentioned at the climax, is what's first assaulted, and it's assault on music and culture that ties right into this neighborhood. It really is like a character. Do watch the colors, the actors, music, dialogue, all that stuff. Look how he creates this world within our screen. And then technically, let me hit this again. Just remember, this is what your story arc looks like. Look for your first setup. Watch the increasing intensity. Watch for the climax. And then the resolution goes to the narrative here. Most people focus just on the riot scene here, but the resolution is just important. And then from a narrative standpoint, the movie's titled Do the Right Thing. Does Mookie do the right thing? Does anyone in the film do the right thing? And I think this goes to the heart of what Spike Lee, as a storyteller, is asking. So there you go. Hit your movie now, and then obviously discussion board and quiz. Thank you.